The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly, for the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. It occurs to me that occasionally the Bible doesn't seem to make any sense at all, and this is particularly true of the parable of the dishonest steward. It's notoriously one of the most problematic of all stories that Jesus told us. In trying to undo its knots, scholars tie themselves in fresh ones. Commentators are often bewildered about it, and those preaching on it long for that last hymn of the service, an escape. So cheerio, folks. The scholars and the commentators and the preachers have all been in too much of a hurry to explain. Some have even tried to rewrite the story of the dishonest steward in contemporary terms, perhaps not just to make it understandable to us now in our particular culture, but also perhaps to make their interpretation clearer to understand. But they have forgotten what Jesus said about his parables, about all his parables, not just this one. Jesus did not tell us the stories, so he said, to make things simple for us. If a parable such as this bewilders us, then it is doing its job. As with any good story, the only answer to the question, what does the story mean, is to tell that story again until we ask the right question. The urge of the parables is natural enough. A parable explained is a parable contained. We have made it safe. It no longer threatens us, just as we try to contain God. I used to think that we tended to put God in a box. And when we wanted something, we would carefully lift the lid and have a quick word with God, shutting the lid before God got out. Then I discovered, as I began my training, that it wasn't God who was in the box, it was us. We are in the box. And we lift the lid every Sunday and we go, hello God. And then we shut it quickly before God gets in. Because when God gets in that box, what happens? The sides of the box are moved out. Our nice little contained compartment that we feel safe in suddenly ceases to exist, and we're vulnerable. The urge to explain the parables is natural. The anxiety to bring the disturbing teacher of Jesus under ecclesiastical control is there from the start for all of us. It is evident, for example, in the explanation of the parable of the sower that Jesus is said to have privately provided for his disciples when the crowds had gone away. Some of you may remember one of the funniest of the old Ealing comedies. It was called The Lady Killers. It was made in 1955. I didn't see it. It was a little before my time. And I first saw it on the grainy black and white television courtesy of rediffusion some 10 years later. And in it, a group of villains use a room in a sweet old lady's house, which one of them has rented as a lodging, as a cover for planning the robbery. But the lady finds out, and the criminals decide they will have to murder her. Yet by a series of hilarious mishaps, each one of them dies, and the lady remains alive. I suppose the audience feels some sort of sympathy for the criminals, even admiration for their ingenuity, without ever forgetting that what they are planning is morally wrong. One critic wrote that to be frivolous about frivolous matters is boring, but to be frivolous about something that is deadly serious, like murder, is true black comedy. Perhaps that explains the story that Jesus told in today's reading about the dishonest steward. It was a joke. Our Lord may have had a well-developed sense of humour. He told a tall tale about a rich man who employed a manager or steward to run his business. But that manager was dishonest and was skimming off some of the money that he was entrusted with for his own use. And when his employer challenged him to present his accounts for auditing, the steward thought up an ingenious way of protecting his own interests and told each of the tenants to falsify the records of how much rent they owed. And by this crooked means, the steward surely feathered his nest by ensuring that any one of those tenants would give him a roof over his head if he was sacked. And by making them complicit in his crime, he could bribe them to give false evidence if necessary. And when the landowner found out, he gave out a great laugh and praised the wicked steward for his low cunning. Truly, there are no nice characters in this story, but we feel the sneaking admiration for the time and the trouble that the steward put into protecting his own interests. However, it has to be said that many commentators indicate that the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible made a rare error in translation, and that it wasn't the master that was praising the wicked steward, but Jesus himself. And that might put a different slant on the parable. So why did Jesus joke about such wicked behaviour? Principally, I believe, to ask why people take so much trouble about their short-term interests, but put so little effort into ensuring their eternal future. Teenagers are often criticised for seeking short-term pleasures and forgetting about their long-term needs. But we all do it. Not only do we do that, but the government is actually notorious at it. The quick fix. The problem is that the present is real, it's tangible, whereas the future is something that is vague and requires an effort of imagination and is uncertain at best, and depending on, as it does, on so many variables, both known and unknown. We can run up a debt without thinking twice about it, not only as individuals but as a nation, imagining that all we have to do is to print more money or borrow from Peter to pay Paul. So many people I know live on what I call virtual money. If they have a windfall, they spend it on an expensive holiday rather than paying off the mortgage. As for what happens to us when we die, well, it's a long way away, because after all, we're all immortal. So we think. We don't want to think about it. Even the dishonest steward is planning for the future, but we often never give it a second thought. But Jesus warns us that we shall all die sometime, And then we shall be asked for an audited account, not of our money, but of how good we've been, what we have done for other people with the material resources that God himself has lent us. When Jesus commented that the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the children of light, he meant that Christians are never so ingenious and eager in their attempts to become virtuous as worldly people are in seeking money and comfort. If only we would pay as much attention to what concerns our souls as we do our business, we would be much, much better people. But we devote 20 times as much money and time to hobbies, sports, gardening as we do to our church. So it's no wonder that church is making so little impression on this materialistic world. The parable of the shrewd steward uses humour to show up the folly of ignoring the future, as surely as the film The Ladykillers warns us that selfishness is no laughing matter. Our own selfishness will be our undoing. The future we are interested in is not necessarily our future. It is the future of God's world, God's people, God's church, and ourselves. The question is, what do we want? Do we want God, or do we want wealth? Perhaps we must change our lifestyles, personally and politically, before it's too late. And the question for us is, what will we do with our lives? Amen.